Am I the a-hole for not letting my kids ride 4 hours home with their grandmother? Around 1 a.m., there was a terrible crash, as my 70F mother-in-law decided to try to navigate our stairs in the dark while wearing a CPAP. She tumbled down the steps, hitting her head bad enough to bruise her face and cause some serious swelling around her ear. I immediately started calling 911, but my wife, who is a NICU right now, told me not to call as her mother had obviously no broken bones and didn't want to go. I'm not a medical professional, and it's seldom wise to argue with a nurse or one's wife, but I pressed for them to at least let me drive her to the ER if they refused an ambulance, but all to no avail. This was just a couple of hours ago, and she's now in the bed with an ice pack and a couple of Tylenol to avoid blood thinners. In the morning, she wants to drive home and take my 9F daughter and 13M son to her place for the week. This has been planned for weeks, and I would have no issues with it, but for the fact that the woman just fell down a flight of stairs and could have a concussion. I love her and don't want her to drive at all, and asked her to stay a couple of extra days, but if she insists on going, I can't stop her. I told my wife I was uncomfortable with the kids riding with her given the danger, and she thinks I'm being silly, which I don't understand at all, as she's a very competent nurse. I finally told her that everyone could be mad at me, but it simply wasn't an option. I'll take the day off and drive them if I must, but I won't take any chances. AITA, top comment on the OP's post. I'm a nurse, and I'm frankly appalled at your wife's decision to not take her mother to the ER. A 70-year-old who suffers a fall and sustains head injuries should absolutely be checked out in the ER, whether or not your wife, your mother, or the Easter Bunny believe it isn't necessary. If she absolutely refuses to go, tell her that your children will not be staying with her at her house, as you do not think it is safe. She could be suffering from a concussion or an intracranial bleed. Update 18 hours later. Well, my mother-in-law was alive and conscious when we woke up this morning. My wife stayed up to watch over her through the night. I spoke to my wife this morning and again shared my concerns regarding the dangers my mother-in-law would be posing to herself and our kids, and my wife was frustrated that I questioned her opinion. But when I asked if she was so utterly certain in her diagnosis than any medical equipment that she was willing to bet both her mother and our children's lives on it, she sheepishly relented and agreed the kids would stay home and that she would encourage her mom to go to the ER. I spoke to my mother-in-law again and asked her to let me take her to the ER, and she shared that her primary reason for refusing medical care was a fear of the cost of doing so. Unfortunately, that's a serious concern of many folks here in the US. Anyways, hearing that, I firmly insisted she go and told her we'd cover any costs. She and my wife finally went to the ER, and after several hours and copious tests, it was in fact determined that she had a concussion as well as rib and wrist fractures and soft tissue injuries, bruising. My wife was pretty devastated with the diagnosis and was deeply apologetic and remorseful. My mother-in-law will be in the hospital until at least tomorrow. The hospitalist pretty directly chided both my wife and mother-in-law. All in all, I'm thankful that things didn't end up worse. The kids only cared about their grandma being okay. Some answers to questions asked. 1. My mother-in-law is a retired school teacher on a very limited fixed income along with my father-in-law. There's no inheritance or other reason my wife would have wished her ill. They have a great relationship. My wife sprang out of bed the moment the accident happened and was almost detached and clinical at the moment, but was later extremely emotional. Her father had a major stroke last year, and we actually just sold our house Friday in order to move closer to her parents to help take care of them in their old age. 2. While my wife has been a NICU nurse for a decade, she was a step-down ICU nurse for 8 years. I realize that doesn't strengthen her case regarding her decision, but perhaps it adds context. She really is remarkable with babies and has saved many lives, but I can certainly understand why the circumstances of these events would paint her in a less than beneficial light. 3. In retrospect, I think my wife was in a state of shock. She's never lost anyone, and her dad's stroke is still fresh on her mind. I've lost both parents and 4 siblings, plus plenty of friends my time in the service, so I have to look at her through a lens of empathy.
Story 2. AITA for telling my husband Happy Father's Day on Mother's Day because it felt like I was doing it all alone today. This morning I woke up early to order myself coffee so he could take our son to pick it up and surprise me. Then they went to the grocery store and thoughtfully picked out my favorite breakfast and came home. My husband made half of the breakfast and then asked me to make the other half. No problem. He acknowledged that he was asking me to do the work and still taking credit for the benefit of our kids' experience and memories. It was no problem until he went upstairs to go to the bathroom, and after 45 minutes I walked upstairs to check on him, and he was asleep in our bed. He slept the entire afternoon. Later that day, I was doing the absolute mountain of dishes, my third load for the day. That's another story. And he asked me to make a grocery list. I asked if he could please make the list because I am in the middle of doing the dishes, and further tried to coax him by using Mother's Day in a playful way. I really didn't want to drop what I was doing to look in the fridge. He was already standing right in front of to tell him what we needed for dinner. He knows what the ingredients are. He could easily look himself, but he insisted I help him. I was super frustrated, so I took a deep breath, washed and dried my hands, and then opened the fridge and started telling him what we need. He could sense my frustration and called me on it. I explained that I was really hoping he could make a list himself just this once because I was in the middle of doing the dishes. I explained that when I make a grocery list, I just look at what we have and write down what we don't have, and I didn't understand why he needed my help. He started talking over me to say if I had a problem making a grocery list with him, I should just have told him. I told him that I did communicate that with him. He doubled down and told me that I need to learn some patience. I smiled and said Happy Father's Day because it was the nicest thing I could think to say. That completely set him off. He went off on me, refused to get ingredients to make our dinner, bought dinner for only himself and our kids, and has been giving me the silent treatment for over an hour. He says I went too far. AITA? ETA? Wow. I did not realize I was going to wake up to so much to read. Thank you for all of your feedback. I have been enjoying my self-brewed coffee this morning and taking in your responses. I have a lot to look over and think about. I know divorce is the obvious answer. Edit 2. No, divorce isn't the obvious answer for this specific incident. Edit 3. I mean, the idea of divorce is not solely based on this one specific incident. Several people have commented thinking everyone is jumping to divorce based on this one situation. It is more complex than this one day. No, I'm not using Reddit as a poll for whether or not to leave my marriage. Both of our mothers are dead, unfortunately. Our children are 6 and under. It is common for parents to help and facilitate the day. 6-year-olds and toddlers can't be responsible for celebrating their parents. I didn't expect anything from him. I know it's just a Hallmark consumerism holiday. People who have commented are correct in saying that this incident is just representative of every other day, but magnified by the fact that Mother's Day was a particularly bad day to choose to be particularly a-hole. I felt like maybe I was the a-hole for making the petty comment. I am in D, and sometimes I have trouble picking up on if I did something wrong that I maybe didn't realize was wrong to say or do. I appreciate all of the anecdotes of your strength and ability to move forward after leaving an exhausting marriage. It is inspiring. Edit, answers to your questions and update 4. Since Sunday, I have not lifted a single finger for Baby Sinclair, my internal nickname for him. Unless it directly impacts our kids, every time he requests my help or to do something for him that he can do himself, I just use my absolute sweetest voice, let him know he doesn't need my help and I believe in his ability to complete the task himself. Then I smile and walk away. The third time I did this, he said I was making him uneasy. I could not help but to LOL, which made him announce that he felt more uneasy. I know it wasn't kind, but I calmly told him he is a pathetic human. I told him I'm sorry it has to be me, but someone in his life needs to tell him to grow the duck up. I told him I care about him and I love him, but I will not tolerate being treated with disrespect even one more day. He said I am abusive. The actual audacity. I spared the divorce conversation for safety and because I have said many times before I want to leave and financially it isn't possible right now. Side note, I tried to leave last year because he was making me feel unsafe and his behavior was erratic. I went to the emergency room in a mental breakdown and told them about the abuse, which they noted in detail on my file. They asked about any plans to escape, and I told them I had it covered and answered their questions about my plan. I had been planning for our escape for a year leading up to this. They told me they had to document the reported abuse in my file. I asked them to check my chart to make sure it is not tied to his account. They looked at it in front of me and said they made sure he wasn't on my emergency contacts or attached to my chart in any way. But then guess who got an email with my chart notes detailing his abuse and my exit plan before I even got home? I had to cool things down and start over with a new plan that I kept entirely to myself. At this point, though, he knew I had saved up money to leave, so most of my savings was depleted within a couple of months. I eventually left with our kids with far less savings, and it didn't take long for me to realize I could not sustain the cost of my original bills, still in my name, and new bills in addition to legal assistance, and the overall cost of starting over. Our leaving caused him to spiral, and he went back to therapy. Soon after, we started to dip our toes into visiting each other, mostly because I didn't want to leave our kids with him. We stuck to outdoor public activities as a family. He has always been able to wear me down and talk me out of a divorce, and this ended up no differently. Even though I know I'm not an anomaly, I felt ashamed and like a complete failure for going back. Surprisingly, he never actually changed. End of side note. Anyway, back to present day, I began to gray rock to throw off his cycle of attempting to rope me back into the argument from the other day. I have calmly listened to him gush over his love for our family and how much he loves and appreciates me and thinks I am an amazing mom. He says he loves me, but all I hear in my head is his voice screaming, ducking female dog at me. It all sounds so obviously disingenuous. I told him his words mean literally nothing while his behavior is the same. It's like saying waffles have legs. It sounds unbelievable, and if I don't see it with my own eyes, I'm not believing it. I told him regardless of if, in the end, we stay together or not, we need to go back to therapy as a duo and separately. I told him he needs to take steps today to move forward with therapy and treating his mental health appropriately. He agreed, but no evidence of walking waffles yet. I am surprised at my ability to completely refuse to do anything he can do himself. I'm more surprised that he's actually doing the tasks himself. I have tried this before, and he ultimately bullies me into doing the task. Not this time. He keeps complaining about his results in ways that are so juvenile and manipulative, always leaving the impression that if I had just done it for him, it would have been done correctly. I just smile and tell him he did a good job with the task and tell him that it sounds like he needs more practice and eventually it will become second nature. I am feeling his attempts to make me miserable, but it is rolling right off of me. At least for now. I cannot express enough how much I appreciate the support and validation here. I appreciate the married people who have shared what their day was like on Sunday and every day as a healthy couple. For those of you who have asked why I am taking to the internet with this in the first place, I have been isolated from my circle for so long my relationships no longer exist. I have limited family period and no family nearby. My mom is dead. My dad sucks. My siblings mostly suck. I have no friends. I work virtually and don't have friendships with my coworkers because we rarely socialize and have opportunities to bond. I don't have opportunities to interact with adults very often. Isn't that the beauty of the internet? Despite my logical brain, years of gaslighting along with my neurodivergence have made it sometimes feel impossible to trust my own judgment. If you are offended by me posting this and have taken the time to voice your disgust for me and my post, I just want to let you know I have processed your complaints and directed them to the correct department. Thank you for your feedback. Update. A lot has happened since my original post. First, since Mother's Day, he has not shown any sort of attempts for progress. Surprise. He has lost his control and repeatedly called me a ducking female dog and other awesome pet names for his minor irritations towards me. Example, I asked him if he wanted my help bringing in groceries. Apparently, he wanted to do it himself to let me relax, and my offering ruined his plans, so he was essentially throwing an adult version of a tantrum. I explained that it doesn't feel like a genuine gesture, especially because now I'm being yelled at for offering to help. LOL. Okay, pal. At one point, I became petty, whoops, and told him to use I statements because that's his go-to therapy speech that he uses on me as a dog whistle during arguments and therapy appointments. He lost his mind, which then made me laugh because I literally do not understand if this is really his perception of reality. I can't take him seriously. I find myself laughing more now than ever, and it's not to mock him. I just can't control my disbelief and don't know how else to cope at this point. Second, I have realized that while I do love and care about him, it is clear that he does not respect me as a person, a mother, or his partner. He doesn't respect our kids. I can't realistically continue living with someone who tries to control my entire life. What kind of life is that to live? I took advice from many comments left on my original post and reached out to friends and family I had been isolated from. The reception was better than I anticipated. I didn't expect the hurt I felt when I found out every single one of them said they wondered if I was in an abusive marriage, but not one of them ever asked me directly when I completely withdrew. I don't blame them, but it was hard to ignore the pain I felt from that. This was also a reason I never reached out to anyone when things got really bad. It seemed like they have their own lives to worry about and clearly weren't concerned about my absence. A couple of the people I reached out to were lifelong friends that I had to formally end friendships with when I started dating my husband because of his jealousy, and I never got to mourn those friendships. It felt like a piece of me that had been broken began to heal. Anyway, it was a positive step because some of my family members were relieved I opened up to them, and now I don't feel so isolated and alone. So thank you to everyone who encouraged me to do that. I am not sure what my next steps are, but I am feeling more confident in my path forward. I do know that from here on out I'm doing whatever the duck I want, DW, as safely as I can. Thank you. Relevant comments. One Redditor wrote, I'm glad for you. I'd like to point out something. Some of these friends who didn't reach out when you withdrew may have not known how to do it, or were afraid you would reject them. I'm sure they are genuinely glad that you are reaching out again. Give them a chance to be your friends. Another one wrote, sorry, but I'm sick of people like Opie pretending like they would have taken it well, or even decently if friends had actually asked that. Opie replies, I'm not pretending I would have taken it well. I even said I don't blame them. I understand from their perspective it would have been extremely tricky. I understand that I am the one who drifted away from them. I understand. I can see a situation logically and feel pain at the same time. Edit. I think the pain I felt really had nothing to do with my friends and family and everything to do with the fact that I felt like I was crazy for so long. I thought everyone thought he was a great person. My pain was partly disappointment in myself for not seeing what everyone else saw. One Redditor wrote, I had a question from your last post. Did the hospital on purpose send him your file notes? Can you sue? Opie replies, they specifically informed me he was not attached to my MyChart, but they did not remove him, and instead he got my after-visit summary sent right to his email after the visit, which contained all of the details. So this is the end of this video. So, what do you guys think about the first story? Did the wife really miss ducking up big time? And what about the second story? Do you think Opie handled the situation well? Share your thoughts or suggestions down below in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It's free for you guys, and it really helps us to keep delivering you guys the videos continuously. You guys can also support us by checking out the links in the video description and the channel's About section. In the meantime, you can watch these videos. Goodbye.